If more of you supported the show, I'd be less sick of podcasts.
The blah blah blah.
Sending out good vibes.
The blah blah blah.
Good vibes. Good vibes.
The blah blah blah.
Good vibes. Good vibes.
108 breaths of deep gratitude and prayers for guidance and protection. And put on a didgeridoo and shamanic drumming track. Shivers or vibrations and stuff like that.
The Garden of Eden is definitely Egypt's Nile Delta River, the valley, in that whole area. Yes, because it literally is, going back to the word Eden, means desert.
Okay, guys, welcome back to the Grimerica Show. We are going to be chatting with Peter the Enigma Seeker from Enigma Seekers over on YouTube. A little bit later, tracked us down on Facebook. I think we're one of his first interviews, so this should be an interesting one. He really, if we were his first one, he did very well. And we got our own enigmatic Graham Dunlop over here coming at you from BC again.
Yeah. Hey, buddy. Thanks.
You're in the harshest lockdown in the country now.
Oh yeah. They're left. My mom and my sister are blown away by what they're keeping up with over here in BC. It's so weird because
well, it should have been, right? I mean, they're the California, Canada.
Yeah, I know, but at some points they seem to be opening up and they seem to be talking about information contrary to the narrative. You know, this was when Bonnie Henry actually said herself that only 2 people outside of old folks' homes had died of COVID, and this was like, a year ago. So there was things that told me like, oh, they're not gonna take this as authoritarian as we thought, but of course they have now. So we'll see.
We'll get you back in Alberta soon. Then you're going to Saskatchewan, even freer. You have to notice if you notice an increase in freedom on your way over. I mean, I guess you don't really notice. The big thing will be when you come back, there'll be no more masks.
Can I tell you what? So I had to stay overnight because I was late coming out here, right? And I had to stay overnight at a little tiny motel, and it was in a ski area, right? Revelstoke. So there's like the ski hill. There's a lot of young people skiing, and man, these people came in to the resort with their professional looking masks, all like fancy masks, and it was just disappointing just to see all these young people coming from the mountain full in on the masks.
They let you stay at the hotel?
I have a hard time with it, dude.
Without your Vax passport?
Yeah, I was able to stay without a mask, without a Vax passport. The guy behind the desk didn't have a mask, which was good. Then he put it on later. But I mean, it's just weird, man. It's just weird.
And then I was saying, in the game store,
in the game store, she made me put on a mask and pull it up over my nose, like she was following me around the store, tell me to put up over my nose. Like, what do you think? I'm spraying shit out of my nose?
She just likes telling people what to do.
I know, and
especially
it's
short, stocky, aggressive looking dude.
It's going to change in March 1st. It's going to change. I'm like, and you just have to be bossy boots for the next week. Then
you seem like you'd be fun to boss around. Maybe that's it.
That was easy. I'm not going to fucking fight.
They see it coming. They're just like, I got
this
motherfucker.
But you could see the fear in her eyes. She's like, how do I deal with this non-mask person in the game store? Like, so that's, I don't want to make people uncomfortable, but it's just it just creeps me out.
The only people with masks on and shoppers yesterday were the people working.
That's great. That's great. That's just outside of Calgary. That'll be different than the game store, right? The game store, the people.
Oh, the game store. These nerds might never get rid of masks. I mean, the game store might keep masks forever.
They love being masked up. I mean,
they're Dungeons and Dragons. You guys are like exhibitionists. Or that's?
No, we're not. It's not all D&D. It's just all the games. It's that whole gaming community.
It's all the same. It's all the same. Don't call it a gaming community, because the gaming community you've been usurped by the video gamers. I don't know what we call you guys now.
Yeah. It's pop culture kind of thing in a way now.
It is not pop culture. I think that's a little aggressive. It's more like
It's become pop culture. The entertainment, gaming, it's all together in a thing that they have to conform. It's no longer the rebels. Like,
video games are rebels.
Well, in the 80s, we were the ones that were, called geeks and stuff. And we were in mom's
Geeks,
basement playing
sure. Not
role-playing games, right?
Not rebels. You're getting these very confused. Very different. I never saw some of my buddies, because my buddies used to play D&D all the time. I made it through like 10 minutes of one game, and I was like, nope, I'm out. I thought this was something very different. Because it sounds cool. They're like, we're going to play Dungeons and Dragons. I'm like, fucking cool. I'm in.
And then what did you like about it?
And I'm like, what is this? And I'm like, this is Dungeons and Dragons, bro. I was like, all right.
What did you like about it? Well, I don't understand. What do you mean?
It's just not for me. Playing make-believe. I just never really been into it.
You're not.
But
there's a whole world and
the point of the story was, I never at one point was like,
this is rebels. I guess what I meant is we went against the grain, right, back then, because nobody, people would look down upon. They looked down on the geeks back then. It was not cool to be a geek. That's what I mean.
They still do. They just pretend they don't.
Now the nerds are the cool ones. Now the nerds are running the world.
You think they're getting all the pussy too?
Who knows, dude?
Can you still say that?
It's not even,
I just get us canceled.
Maybe we can't be canceled.
Uncancelable. You heard it here first. Drop a hard R then, Dunlop.
This was a great chat with Peter about. He's got a theory that Egypt. I wanted to pull up a map actually
Egypt
before I started
Atlantis.
talking. I forgot. His theory is that Egypt, Atlantis is in Egypt. And I don't know. I kind of like it. I kind of like the theory. I thought it was fun to discuss.
Eckhart is Steiner.
I'm going to try and go over to that part of the world here quickly. I'm just fascinated.
We're going to go over to that part of the world in November.
I'm fascinated by all this Middle East and Egypt and how. It's just fascinating to me. So he thinks it's kind of like at an island in the Nile near Cairo.
Well, I think he thinks it's that whole Nile Delta.
No. I think he says there's an island there in the Nile.
No. He says that the Nile used to loop around, so it kind of seemed like an island, but it's that whole oasis of greenery.
Oh yeah, you think so, eh?
Yeah, I'm pretty sure. I mean, I guess they'll be able to find out in like 20 minutes when they hear him say it. Want to bet? Should we bet?
Yeah, sure.
$50.
I'm just looking for the island of the Nile.
There's no island. This is the easiest $50 I ever made. Speaking of making $50, have you guys been getting some value from our little podcast here lately with our little Graham Dunlop? Head over to grimerica.ca/support today. Sign up for a monthly, make a one-time donation, whatever you can do. We appreciate it. Some people do get confused, think we're a free podcast. Technically, we're not. We do put it all out for free because it's just easier. And then hope that you guys, if you're finding some value from it, from our value, if you're finding some value in what we provide, maybe it's adding some value to your work day, making it less shitty, making your commute go by a little quicker, keep you company during your workout. I don't know. You tell us. Spam Graham, tell us where you listen to the show. And grab your device right now. Head over to grimerica.ca/support today and decide what the Grimerica show is worth to you. Is it worth $1 a month, $2 a month, 50 cents an episode, $100 an episode? You decide. grimerica.ca/support. Send some value back our way today. We would love you for it.
I'm looking at the island in the Nile right now. There's a bridge called the Long Live Egypt Bridge that goes across this island, and it's in smack in the middle of the
How
city.
big is it? How big is
the island? It's an okay size. I mean,
what's an okay size?
It's
you got a scale there. You got a scale. What's the scale?
Do I have a scale?
Are you on Google Maps?
Oh yeah, it's about 2 kilometers by 4 kilometers.
So the entire civilization of Atlantis was on a 2 kilometer by 4 kilometer island in the middle of the Nile. It was 75 people. And they just got They got COVID.
Well, it was maybe bigger back then.
Oh,
yeah.
How big can an island in a river really be, though?
Well, the river could be bigger, right? Back then, 12,000 years ago, it was huge. Anyways, you know what the funny thing was? So of course this happened to me again, dude, and I'm not just saying this to advertise our books or anything like that, but I'm reading the books after we had this discussion about the pillar of Hercules, because he's sort of saying that the pillars could be many different things. It could be doesn't have to be at the entrance to the Mediterranean in the west there. It could be in Italy. It could be. And then, of course, what am I reading? I'm reading that book 6 of Ancient Egypt, The Light of the World. And it says here, I mean, I can't believe, I'm going to send this to him because it's hard to believe that this is the book I'm reading the next day. There's a legend of Hercules relieving Atlas as sustainer of the heavens, or in the original, the ceilings of the double earth. Atlas is the Egyptian Shu Anur, the elevator of the sky. And the relief of Atlas by Hercules is equivalent to the relief of Shu by the sun god Ta as the sustainer of all things in Amenta. When the pillar of the earth, or Ta of Amenta, was added to the pillar of heaven. So then I'll skip past this bit because it gets into Horus and Hercules, and then he gets into saying that Greek legends also assert that Hercules separated 2 mountains to form the 2 columns or pillars that were a dual figure of the twofold mundane and celestial mount. This helps to identify the double columns with the mount of earth and the mount of heaven. Many illustrations could be cited of these 2 pillars erected at the entrance to the temple or the house of a god. Hercules, says Herodotus, was worshipped in a temple at Tyre. And in the temple were 2 pillars, one of fine gold, the other of emerald stone, both shining exceedingly at night. These are, to say the least, somewhat suggestive of the green mount of earth, the Egyptian mount of emerald, and the golden mount of heaven, which survive as the green hill far away and Jerusalem the golden in the Christian hymns. Anyways, just I feel like there's a whole other thread that can be followed with these pillars. You know, maybe it's hidden. Maybe Atlantis is 30 feet under the earth, like he's saying, closer to the action than we think. You know,
maybe it's just like right under the sand, right there. It's just
exactly. It's right
I said, bring some shovels to Egypt. Contact at thecabin.com if you heard me mention that we're going to Egypt a couple of times and want to know what I'm talking about. I don't think there's many spots left, but there might be a couple. And I mean, it doesn't hurt to throw your name on the list because, I mean, shit happens. Some people might back out, have to cancel.
Is it sold? Sorry, I missed that.
It's very close to sold out, but I don't think it's actually sold out.
Yeah.
Very, very close.
Yeah.
Reminds you, I have to go get new passport photos for the kiddos. All right, you want to do your oppo or you want to do your email?
Yeah, let's do it. I got a long email to read. I'd like to read it.
Yeah, I'll be counting on you.
It's really
to
nice.
Help me watch the kids out there in Egypt.
Support. Oh yeah, I'll help you watch the kids. Yeah, I've been there before.
And now another edition of the Grimerican Goodies by the people, for the people.
Good morning, Graham and Darren. I've spent a very enjoyable Saturday morning in bed, drinking coffee, waking up slowly, listening to your Outlawed episode with Al from Forum Borealis. I recently enjoyed listening. What?
Forbore.
I really enjoyed listening to Al. And once again, the value that Grimerica gives to my life just keeps on giving. As I know, I have access to hours of content on the Borealis podcast I would never have known without you booking another amazing guest onto your show. You also introduced me to Damien Eccles, which in turn led me to discover Dion Fortune, Israel Regardi, Manly P. Hall, Napoleon Hill, and the list goes on. Most recent, and hey, just so everybody knows, there's also the good Manly P. Hall audiobook that we've done called The Secret Teachings of All Ages, which is basically like a sort of a Bible tome of ancient mysteries. But I say Bible because it is like a really thick tome of it's got everything in it. Most recently, Darren's recommendation of No More Mr. Nice Guy has helped me to help someone very close to me. And of course, help myself. Study and practice of the works of the people listed above has led me to find a faith in my life that I didn't always realize I was searching for. I need to say thank you to your show and the podcasting community in general for the selfless support and promotion of each other's content, which gives listeners like me a seeker's sat nav on the search for the road to faith over fear. The past few years has been tough. I've been in recovery from addiction to drugs that carry the most possible stigma, the worst possible stigma, and which left me feeling lonely and ashamed and shamed. My addiction was, in reflection, relatively short, around 2 years. I continued to take care of my day-to-day responsibilities to my family, sometimes only barely, and I caused so much pain to so many people that I love. I continued to work through my managerial job at a small construction company, which not only carries a lot of responsibility, but more importantly, my performance directly affected the livelihood and financial security to the 6 families of the workforce. Some would say that I was a functioning addict. I would not be so quick to agree. I was selfish, ugly, frightened, out of control, and causing pain and fear to everyone around me. My recovery is now 16 months successful. Listening to podcasts, and particularly Grimerica and the content and books you have introduced me to, have been so critical to this success. Without knowing it, you have both been with me, supporting me through the most difficult time of my life. Ironically, at the same time that you gave me the most. Ironically, at the time that you gave me the most, I was not financially able to support you. Every time that Darren asked for support, I spoke out loud. I will do, mate, as soon as I can. I promise I will. I became an outlawed subscriber a few months ago, and I send you my support with nothing but love and gratitude. The faith and strength that I've found in myself as a result of studying the writings of the people I discovered by listening to podcasts has directed me on a path of light, love, and positivity. I'm learning the immense power that giving to my fellow man holds. I'm now regularly donate food parcels to my local food bank, give my time and support to those that I can see need it, and also try to help others in any possible way when the circumstances arise. And like many others, I would have previously walked on by to people and places that were not my concern. Changing this world starts with changing yourself. If these words do reach the ears of your audience, I know that there are so many people out there that want to change this world for the better, but feel lost on where to start. Start now. Start around you by giving whatever you have at your disposal, your time, your care, your labor, your money. Give it to whoever you can. Give it to whoever you can see needs it, regardless if you know them or not. With all I've been through, I have belief that we are all of the same family. We all have the same needs. At times, some of us are up and some of us are down. Reach out to others up. Reach out to help others up. This leads me on to say that those of you who haven't quite managed to give your financial support to Graham and Darren, and I know there are a ton of you out there that want to, but just haven't managed yet, that purchasing, here it is, that purchasing adult brain audiobooks has been another way for me to say an extra thank you at the same time as learning and taking further steps on my journey into self. We need shows like this to connect, to be part of something, to be amongst similar souls, give our collective strength to secure this oasis of truth and non-agenda entertainment. Buy the books, listen and learn. If all this does ever get taken away, we will always have our knowledge, always have our books. Write down your thoughts, your lessons and learning. Talk to your children and your loved ones about what you've experienced. I can understand the importance that certain ancient peoples gave to the oral teaching of history. Try and algorithm that, you tech-controlling fucks. I didn't write this to you thinking or wanting it to be read out loud on the show. It just went that way. I just wanted to say thank you and explain the reasons why you both and your show mean so much to me. To be honest, writing about my addiction on what could possibly be a public platform has taken my newfound faith over fear. As a quick side note, and getting back to Al from Forum Borealis, it was so entertaining to hear you guys struggling to understand his accent at times. I live in the UK, and particularly part of the UK that was ruled by Danelaw. Maybe this is why, on a whole, people from England can understand most accents. We have such a vast range and such a small island. We come across so many different accents each and every day of our lives. Al sounded like he learned English in Ireland when he was talking about algorithms messing with his show titles and said, what the fuck is going on here? He sounded like a man born and bred in Dublin.
Few people thought he was Irish.
Yeah. Yeah,
Few
that's
people thought he was
interesting,
French.
That Scandinavian Irish mix there.
Few people thought he was French too.
Keep up the good work, boys. Thank you so much for everything. If you do make it to the UK, contact me for contact at the castle. I'm publicly promising my help in any way possible. And just before I go, Graham, you might be interested to know that I am a rural Leicester. Leicester. I think it's just Leicester.
Leicester.
About 80 miles from Skipton, a distance that you boys will drive to buy breakfast, but a distance that you boys will drive to buy breakfast, but a bloody long way on our winding little roads, Darren.
But like lunch?
Take care, fellas.
We'll be there by lunch.
Anthony.
Instead of breakfast. Thanks, Anthony.
I think he's just saying that like it really seems like it's only 80 miles, but when you get on those windy little roads that have barely enough room for 2 cars to pass by, it takes a lot longer than you'd think.
Can I bring my truck?
Well, you wouldn't want to even drive a truck around. No, you wouldn't.
We'll just get like a miniature something.
It's they're driving experts there, man. The European drivers and the English drivers are just amazing. They just pass each other. You can see you just pull over. You're so aware of what's going on. Like when there's a car coming, that you just pull over and let the guy go down the middle. Like people are constantly just adjusting their driving to make room for other people.
Fun.
It's fascinating. I drove around England just looking for castles with my family. It was fantastic.
Are you ready?
So, anyways, just to mention, I don't know if you mentioned it in your donation begging segment, but Grimerica Outlawed is a completely separate podcast feed. You can search it in any podcast player. You can also go to the website and listen to it. And when you contribute $6.39 a month, you get the whole extra second half of Grimerica Outlawed, which is a completely separate feed, right?
That's just 73 or 74 episodes now. Another extra one coming up tomorrow.
And we get into some deeper conversations about what's going on in the world, current events, a little bit more kind of geopolitics and deep state and secret societies and all kinds of stuff like that.
Then, of course, there's the Rockfin stuff as well, which we'll have a little teaser for here later. A couple of highlights from our episode with Leslie. Lindsay?
Oh, are you putting that out in today's episode? Or?
Yeah, I'll put it in today's.
Oh, are you? Okay. So I got to timestamp that guy pretty quick. That's Lynn Hodgson.
I knew it started with
Philip
an L.
Hodgson about Camp X. Yeah.
It was a fun one. It was a good one. You got an Oppo?
No, I mean, let's do a quote. Let's keep the Oppo for next week.
Saving the Oppo?
Yeah.
It's the profound quote of the week. Darren, can you guess it? It's the profound quote of the week.
Okay, who said this?
The human who spoke it.
And maybe who said this and when? Let's do when as well.
When as well?
Yeah. The nation's immediate problem is that while the common man fights America's wars, the intellectual elite sets its agenda. Today, whether the West lives or dies is in the hands of its new power elite. Those who set the terms of public debate, who manipulate the symbols, who decide whether nations or leaders will be depicted on 100 million television sets as good or bad. This power elite sets the limits of the possible for president and Congress. It molds the impressions that move the nation or that mire it.
Kissinger.
Close. Nixon. A few
Were
years
they
after...
buddy? Were they the two buddies? Was Kissinger Nixon's Secretary of State?
I don't know.
Neither do
I don't think so. This is after a few years after resigning as president.
Oh, right. He resigned. We need more people to resign. Bunch of them.
Good luck. That'll never happen anymore. No matter how, no, they just get away with everything. I mean, maybe that's the key. They just knew, like, after Nixon and Watergate and all that, right? Now they just fucking get away with 10 times as much, 10 times as worse. And nobody fucking, because of exactly what Nixon said there.
Bingo bango. Kissinger served as National Security Advisor and Secretary of State under President Richard Nixon. So I was like within a degree.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Well, big thanks. I hope you guys enjoyed this chat. We like to say we're going to play that a couple little highlights from our chat with Len on the Project X, which will be coming out on Rockfin right away. Brady said he should have that done in a day or two, so that'll be on Rockfin right away. Rockfin.com/Grimerica, which is pretty much the only place to see anything video from us these days since we quit streaming. Take the pressure off of the live stuff. And then enjoy the fantastic chat with Peter from Enigma Seekers. The link is in the show notes to check out his YouTube channel, which is fantastic. I think he's got a new one coming out in a couple weeks. You watched them already? All three?
I watched 2, 3 isn't out yet. Part 3
I have a teaser for it.
Of the what?
I have an advanced copy of it. I'll send it to you.
Oh, do you?
Yeah.
Of the Enigma Seekers in part 3?
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I like it. I just like looking at Atlantis in different ways. I mean, we talked to Randall and people that believe it's in the Azores.
And if you're hearing this on Peter's channel, because I think he said he was going to repost it, then head over to grimerica.ca today and check out all our stuff. Other than that, enjoy the chat with Peter from Enigma Seekers.
It's close to it. So basically what we're talking about is a World War II spy training school in Canada, and the training of secret agents to go in behind enemy lines and do the kind of things that are being done right now in Ukraine. It's very similar. As a matter of fact, the camp trained agents to go into the Balkans, so they would have been very familiar with all of the countries that we're talking about today. So they trained over 500 secret agents at Camp X, dispatching them on a regular basis for the 1,000-day life of Camp X. So here's the thing. In 1940, Churchill, of course, was fighting the war against the Axis powers, and with very little help other than Commonwealth countries such as Canada, but not the great wealth and might of the United States. And so as Hitler went along and through Europe and picked off one country after the other, he obviously had his sights on Great Britain next, and then beyond that is something called Operation Fish. I don't know whether, some people know about this. Many Canadians don't know about this. But during that same summer of 1940, Churchill had to set sail with a number of ships that are mentioned here on this page, with $8 billion in gold bullion, Britain's gold reserves, probably the equivalent of $8 trillion today. And it sailed during along the northern route of the Atlantic, staying well away from the German U-boats of the Wolf Pack. One Canadian that most Canadians have never heard of is a man named Constantine. General Constantine was a very important man during the Second World War, one of the key players on a world level. And that's because he was responsible for two things. Number one, Britain's gold reserves, and two, Camp X. He was the liaison between the British and the Canadian military, Canadian Army, and all of those who were at Camp X as instructors or commandant, et cetera, et cetera. I was talking about Station M. M stands for magic. And that's because when you talk about James Bond and all the things that Ian Fleming learned of operations of special agents and secrecy and all that type of thing. And of course, he had the lab where Q would take him through the lab and show him all these toys and gadgets that they were making for agents to use behind enemy lines. Well, that really existed. And in the basement of Casa Loma, I was able to show the owners that all the things that they did down there. And again, as I just mentioned, on the evening of December the 6th, 1941, Lieutenant Colonel Roper Colbeck in the center with his kilt on, and his senior officers arrived on the shores of Lake Ontario to open up Camp X. Each one of these fellows that you see in this photograph are experts in a field. They're British agents, British instructors, but they're all experts. They're experts in unarmed combat, silent killing, small weapons, map reading,
Morse code,
and the next thing is the Hydra operations. The Hydra operations. This was the most powerful radio station in the world at the time. There's a man in this photograph in the upper right-hand corner, and it's not me, but it's a guy named Pat Bailey, and Benjamin DeForest Pat Bailey. He was in my mind, the most brilliant Canadian ever born. And two of the fellows that I met over the years back in the 1970s, Joe Galeni on the left, codenamed Gordon, Andy Durovitz on the right, codenamed Daniels, two Canadian Hungarians, both trained at Camp X, both sent overseas into missions into Hungary. They were both captured by the Gestapo, brutally tortured at a special prison for SOE agents, and managed to escape on the same day and make it back to England, and then subsequently make it back to Canada. And fortunately for me, they lived just a few miles away from where I live today. So I met them back in the 70s, and of course I was able to tell their entire stories in books.
Cool. And this is your latest book?
My latest book is that complete story plus many more things. I didn't even touch on the topic of South America, but the whole South America operations of Sir William Stevenson. I've covered everything in that book.
All right, Peter from Enigma Seeker on YouTube. Welcome to Grimerica. Thanks for joining us.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
Yeah, this will be fun. I was watching some of your videos that, I mean, you're challenging some of our sort of stuff that we've done on Atlantis, and I think it's fantastic. We can have a chat about Egypt and Atlantis and whatever your interests are in that subject. So thanks.
Yeah, thank you for having me on. I ran across you guys from watching your podcast on Randall Carlson, so that was really nice and got me into your channel.
Yeah, that's been great ever since we started with Randall, like what, six or 7 years ago, I think. Mm-hmm. We heard him on Joe too. We're like, oh man, we got to talk to this guy. There was just something about the way Randall described the catastrophes, that really kind of just put things in a different perspective.
And he's still pretty articulate for his age. I was surprised he still can explain things really well. I mean, my grandpa, at that age, he wouldn't be able to go into depth too much and stuff.
Yeah, and I have a sense he's just getting going too, because I mean, it's not like he's been, doing this in front of people. Well, I don't know, Darren. Actually, maybe he has for a long time, but I mean, it's only been doing the sort of the podcast and the new media for 6 or 7 years, I guess.
Yeah, possibly 10 years. Yeah. I can't remember. I know he's been on Talk with Graham Hancock and Joe Rogan like over. I think it was over 5 or 6 years ago.
Yeah.
the first time.
And now
what
he's
got you
doing a
in-
weekly show
Yeah.
Mhm. That's cool.
with the bros. I was on the live stream last night accidentally. I didn't mean to be, but whatever.
Well,
Yeah,
you know what happened? So when we met with Randall in Colorado and one of our events there, it was fantastic. And I mean, before what led up to that is we were doing monthly Zoom calls there? I think it was monthly Zoom calls
It
with
was
all the
every
participants
Monday
at our
by the
event.
end.
Every Monday, that's right. Every Monday by the end. And so we were talking to Randall and the Snake Brothers, and we're saying, you guys got to keep this Monday thing going all the time. Like, just, the people are loving it. It seemed like a great sort of thing to just keep the Monday show going. And then that turned into Cosmographia, which is fantastic.
Yeah, I wasn't sure how to say your channel at first. I thought you were connected with Cosmographia for a second, but I wasn't sure if you guys were separate channels or had a connection with their channel.
Yeah, we're the rogue, Canadians. So
Okay.
totally connected to them.
We're
So what
buddies
got you
with them all.
interested in the ancient mysteries and stuff?
Well, I have a master's in landscape architecture from Iowa State University. So I also have been to Japan back in high school. So like visiting some of those ancient sites in Japan, and then just kind of learning about, ancient landscape architectural wonders around the world, from Persepolis to Egypt, and then some of the, the modern gardens of Persia. So that really got me into it from there. But what got me into my channel really wasn't anything to do with ancient mysteries at first. It really was exploring phenomenons, because I have personally seen a UFO. Okay, and now I got my opinions on it, so you guys can.
No,
check it out
hey,
if you
we
want.
all
But
do, and we've seen them too. So this is great.
It's when you start to see something really freaky stalking you around in the middle of the night, and then actually trying to communicate with it or summon it with a flashlight, and it worked. That really opened your mind, and I can't prove it, of course, because the supernatural paranormal is just far more smarter than I am. So, but yeah, I've had some paranormal experiences, and I've seen UFOs, and back in 2011, and like 3 or 4 times. But since then, I've learned a lot about it, and now I find no need to really try to prove its existence in the sense of whether it's extraterrestrial or the supernatural paranormal hypothesis. I think it's something possibly in the middle. But I'm leaning more supernatural now. I used to believe extraterrestrial, but since the government is now basically coming out and saying, yeah, there's something out there, I'm going to leave it up to them to go gather the data from universities and present the conclusion in the next century.
The conclusion that you will think it's the opposite of?
I think
Not you, but
I
not
feel
you,
like
but
I
a lot of the
know
UFO
what it is.
community. Yeah.
Yeah,
Well,
I've watched Third Phase of Moon. I've seen some of their videos. They're fake videos. They're potentially authentic videos. I've seen, what's his name? Security 10, all those guys. And I've looked to videos in the past and photos, and I've come, for example, there's one photo I remember finding one of a UFO taken in a picture over Marquette, Michigan. It looked like a picturesque photo just over the lighthouse. And I, as someone who knows how to use Photoshop, there's certain things I look for to figure out if it could be potentially fake. And there's just like this purple hue outline sometimes you see in UFO photos. And if you don't see that hue, then most likely it's a direct selection cut and pasted in there. But if you do see that little transition when you zoom into pixels, then it's like, okay, now this is on my radar, so I'm going to keep that and document that. And I've also talked with Linda Moulton Howe a couple of times when I was documenting the mystery boom phenomenon, or USN's unidentified strange noises, that happened around 2011, 2012 as well. So that was interesting, and I personally have had that experience when I saw the UFO. Couldn't get it on video, but yeah, I've had some paranormal experiences, but from there, having those experiences started to make me think, okay, how does this connect with the Bible, with the supernatural, not taking things too literal, like not taking everything in the Bible literal, but not taking everything that Plato says literal either, and finding some middle ground. And is there some truth in that middle ground? And it seems like there's something out there.
Yeah, that's fantastic. So, so can we dig into your UFO sighting a little bit? Like you're saying you saw something and you're trying to communicate with it, and can you describe it in some more detail? Like, was it a craft or a light, or
it was a big red orb of light?
Noise? A big, we
and
did that.
And it was producing loud booms, and I summoned it with a flashlight. It's on my porch. I've tried 3 weekends in a row. On the third weekend, that's when it started to respond. So it starts out with faint flashes of light. I use a little flashlight, so it's not. I found out, based on what like Dr. Michael S. Heiser talks about when he talks about the supernatural. It's not that they're seeing the flashlight. It's somehow there's some kind of psychic connection there. Summoning, this idea of summoning the paranormal. It gets into that occult stuff a little bit, and it can be dangerous because it could be something demonic. It could be something more interdimensional, extra-dimensional, that's way beyond extraterrestrial. That could be screwing with our civilization. So you got to be careful. And yeah, I summoned it, and it responded with 3 flashes of light over my house at night around 10 o'clock. And then I went to the other porch. My camera started to die. I was waiting for it, and then a big red orb about the size of a very big beach ball or a small car appeared right over the woods about 200 feet away, just over the treetops. I could actually see the red light reflecting over the treetops, and it was just moving slowly away. It wasn't producing the booms at that time. It was like about an hour before, it was making booms. At the time that there was cannons being shot around, this was like in July, so there's sometimes the park that shoot little cannons, and this was in Cedar Rapids, Iowa. But I could distinguish that it was changing in direction, and I knew it wasn't the fireworks. Fireworks have a very particular crackling noise and distance, but this was changing in direction, and it happened multiple times over other parts of Iowa. That was reported in Waterloo, Iowa, Burlington, Iowa, and these mystery booms just start popping up. And I started researching, like, okay, is there a connection between UFOs and these mystery booms? And me and Linda Moulton Howe were trying to piece that together. And we figured out that, yeah, they're somehow producing these booms as a way of creating a mystery to spark our curiosity to psychologically affect us in the long run. Like, this has been going on apparently since the 70s, but they flare on, they flare off. They do these weird little behaviors. So there's not just UFOs, there's USNs. And I coined that phrase, USNs, unidentified strange noises. But there's a lot of fakery out there too. Gotta be aware of that.
Well, geez, that's fantastic. I mean, Darren, do you remember that when we started up the podcast way back when, that was when those mystery booms were pretty, do you remember that?
I
Calgary
do vaguely remember
Edmonton. I think there was one up north in Edmonton, but somebody said that was fake, but it had the guy in the high vis and he was in the woods recording it.
It was a boom.
No, it wasn't. It's
or
more
was it
of
a
like
shriek?
It's more of a thundering, not quite just a boom, but many booms. Like it sounds like I would like, what I was thinking is there's some kind of underground tunneling happening, and it was echoing up through the. But then some people said they thought they heard it from the sky too. So, but this isn't a new phenomena. I mean, this is Charles Fort was writing about that in the 1800s. I mean, lots of booms coming, lots of mystery booms.
Graham summons UFOs too.
I think it was. I don't know if you guys know YouTuber Dabu7, but he's kind of a podcast guy too. But him, me, and Sheila Aliens. I don't know if you know her. And Linda Moulton Howe and a few others were kind of documenting these mystery booms. And they started to theorize, oh, is it underground? But it was very consistent to the point where you could tell this was aerial. It was very audible to the point that it actually shook the ground. It was so strong, such a concussion wave that you could tell it was a point source, and it shook the ground. Sometimes it would be catched on USGS, sometimes it wouldn't. And sometimes the local media would say, "Oh, it's just it's a sonic boom from the Air Force." Or in Canada, this is when Canada started to make this phrase "frostquakes" go viral, and then the U.S. media starts to use that same terminology when it actually started to flare up in a place called Clintonville, Wisconsin, and other places in New England. It actually reached NBC with Tom Brokaw, not Tom Brokaw. I think it was. So they were reporting in national news because they actually reached such an intensity that it started to get the national media's attention, but then it died down. But what's interesting is they would produce these booms. There was a pattern, but you can't notice these patterns unless you look at the long term. And they would flare up in the wintertime, and then they would die down in the summer, and then they would flare up again. And then people start to associate with these frostquakes. And there's no ice jam in the world that can cause a sonic boom that could shake the ground. I don't believe that. I took a little basic geology, but so yeah, it's a weird phenomenon. But putting that aside, I mean, that was my first inspiration into getting to mysteries and enigmas. But then from there, I started to, think a little bit more about my faith, a little bit more about the paranormal, because I started to also have paranormal experiences. About 4 years ago, I've actually personally seen a little wooden ball in my classroom at Iowa State University with my friend that I did try to document on a video, and it was teleporting around, and I knew that was a poltergeist. So I'm like, oh my goodness, this shit's real. I mean, I am Catholic, so I'm probably a little biased, but at the same time, we're pretty atheist about this stuff too. We're like, oh wow, this shit really is real. I mean, it really starts to hit you when you actually physically see it.
Was a wooden ball? A wooden ball?
There was something, there's electromagnetic energy that was controlling this wooden ball that's used for modeling, for landscape design. You just put on, cardboard and balsa wood, things like that. And it was teleporting this ball around the room. It would just, it would drop it from the air and then just fall on the ground. And I'm like, what the hell? And my friend was pretty shocked. I mean, he's not he's a Muslim, but he's not a strong practicing Muslim, and he was freaked out. And he thought, he blamed me because you have this channel and this stuff's coming because of you. But so there's a whole video on that I made. It's like 30 minutes. The original video would have been over an hour trying to capture this. But yeah, the paranormal, the supernatural, and that's why I wear this. This is the Ankh symbol of Egypt, symbolizing magic, and to me also Jesus in some sense. I am a Christian. I'm Catholic, but I'm not a evangelical in the sense I don't believe the Earth's 10,000 years old. I don't believe take the Bible too literal. There's a lot of complications. You look at the Bible as like a library. I think Randall Carlson said that. I think it was Randall that might have said that. And it's a compilation of many things that's very complicated and compiled together over centuries, if not thousands of years. So it has mysteries in them, and Freemasons like Randall Carlson, they believe in the Bible too. They believe there's mysteries and enigmas in there. And we and Catholics and Freemasons agree that there's definitely a supernatural realm, or there's something beyond the physical, but at the same time, it does have very physical effects. Okay, UFOs are very tangible. At the same time, they also have behaviors that behave almost interdimensional. Like, they don't seem to fit the characteristics of extraterrestrial. I used to believe that, but I don't see the evidence pointing to that anymore. So I start to lean more towards the paranormal or supernatural hypothesis, or what YouTuber Suspect Sky might call like interdimensional, extra-dimensional beings. Some could be demonic, some could be angelic, or maybe something more in the middle, like us. Hard to say, but in many cases, there's some freaky stuff that seems very doesn't have the best intention for us. And others, it's like you're not sure yet, So in Egypt, ancient Egypt, going to Egypt, has always believed in magic, in the supernatural. This has been taught, and Catholics adopted this, Persians adopted this. This knowledge that came out of Egypt about the supernatural has proliferated into Rome, into Persia, and this is where I hypothesize, getting into Atlantis, that the story of Atlantis is probably coming from Egypt, in an actual location somewhere in Egypt. And because we know Solon, he got it from Egypt, from Sonchus of Sais in the Delta. So, and then from there, the translations can get messy. People can kind of misinterpret. Then politics gets involved. Plato could reinterpret it to fit to his times, because that's the time they were starting to discover the Straits of Gibraltar. The so-called pillars of Hercules, which I don't think there's any pillars over there, but that's the time period when they started to push Atlantis farther and farther away from its original source. So that's where I hypothesize that I think Atlantis really is probably Egypt, and Graham Hancock and Robert Paval and others have said that potentially, even YouTubers like Ancient Architects say that there's a potential that Egypt really could be far older. But the problem is there's so much recycling going on because you've got such a density. And this is where I hypothesize, based off what Ethiopian Christians and Muslims believe, that in order to find Atlantis, you have to find the Garden of Eden. Once you find the Garden of Eden, then you can find Atlantis. Because Atlantis is just a name. It's just the Greek name. But there's many other names. The word Anatolia derives from Atlantis. The word Atlantia from Ethiopia derives from Atlantis. But it's not that Atlantis was called Atlantis to the original Atlanteans, which even that word may not be correct. So that's the problem when you disseminate translations over thousands of years, names change. But you can go back to an original source, and we know Göbekli Tepe is, potentially over 10,000 years old, 10,000 BC. So that's in the region of Anatolia. So it's possible those people migrated down into Egypt, mixed with the natives of Africa, and create a new civilization. Of course, they probably warred with each other as well. And these kingdoms, this confederation of loose kingdoms, started to form in the Garden of Eden. Eden in Hebrew means Gan Ba'eden, which means the desert. So Eden means desert, the garden of the desert, the garden of Africa. So in this oasis that is the Nile Delta region, and in the river as well, in the valley, it's just the largest agricultural oasis in the whole Middle East. People want to say Mesopotamia, and it was a professor from Missouri State who wanted to promote the Mesopotamian hypothesis. I'm like, looking at this as a landscape designer, landscape architect, I'm like, where's the abundant amounts of silt though? You need silt, and the Bible hints this. Adam came from the earth, the silt, the land of Kemet. Egypt means the black soil. And that's so important for civilization. You have to most civilizations start on rivers. So that's a good place to start. And then from there, you can see that the geography of Egypt, which is basically shaped either as a lotus symbol or a snake. In the Bible, they hint about snakes symbolizing supernatural creatures. So yeah, I hypothesize that Atlantis and Eden is coming from Egypt, and specifically in the region of either Heliopolis or the Cairo region. But the problem is, if that really is Atlantis, Cairo is so old that almost all that stone has been recycled. The Romans took stones, the Persians took stones, the Egyptians themselves, and even up to Constantinople. Egyptian megaliths were brought up to there. So that's the problem, is all that stone from the original Atlantis could be disseminated into the Mediterranean region from the past, 4,000 or 5,000 years. And that's why you can't find it. So big hypothesis, but yeah.
Yeah, I got a million questions. Darren, do you want to say anything? Because I can.
Isn't that where didn't Matapocalypse thought it went from the Azores to Egypt?
Well, Matapocalypse was drawing some lines and geometry.
Maybe I'm thinking of someone else. Yeah, it was Matapocalypse drawn lines from the Azores into Egypt, right?
Yeah, to the Sphinx or the actual Giza Plateau, and it goes right to where people say Atlantis are in the north part of the Azores. And then he also went to Göbekli Tepe, which was 1,080 miles to Göbekli Tepe, and then parallel straight across to the top of Azores. Sorry, so to the north of Azores.
Oh, that's right. He thought that that Göbekli Tepe and the Giza Plateau were sort of tied in together to mirror what the Azores used to look like, or something like that.
Yeah, something like that.
Yeah, I just have trouble believing the Azores hypothesis, is because, I don't think geography really changes that much in the past 20,000 years. Maybe the coastlines, of course, but it's an island. In civilizations, we know from the Mississippian mound builders, the Han Chinese, from the Indus Valley, Egypt, Mesopotamia, even almost every major civilization starts on rivers. And many professors say that's probably where we need to start. And if you look, one way of looking that Plato was describing is an island, you could say that the Egyptian valley of the Nile Delta region is an island of green in a sea of sand and water. And we know that there are megaliths found off the coast of Egypt. And now those are probably not as old, but potentially those have been broken down and recycled to fit to new statues. If they came from original megalith, they could chip it down and reduce it to something a little smaller.
Off the coast in the Mediterranean or south?
In the Mediterranean, south. Yes. Yeah. But I don't think that's where you would want to put a capital city, though. I think the specific entrance of the Nile Delta fan is very narrow. It's such a strategic geopolitical area that's so important because it goes into that fan. and it's in the shape of a snake or a lotus flower, such a crucial symbol in Egyptian mythology. So it's possible that it was an island, but within the river. And we know, like Cahokia, for example, was potentially destroyed by massive flooding by rivers. And rivers were had major effect on civilizations from the Chinese, especially the Yellow River and the Indus Valley. So I would say the probability of advanced civilization being destroyed on a river is higher than something out in the sea on the Azores, where there's a lack of resources. There's no real fresh water, not enough to have a population in the hundreds of thousands. Even today, modern day today, there aren't tens of millions of people living there. It's just not as habitable. But Egypt has that temperate, even back 10,000 years ago, it was still a desert in that area, but that silt was so important that came up from the rivers of the Nile, the Blue Nile and the White Nile, that came from the volcanic regions of Mount Kilimanjaro. That brought such abundant amounts of silt, and if you don't have that silt, you cannot have a civilization. And so that's why the Bible seems to emphasize the idea that Adam came from the soil, from the earth. Is the idea that you're establishing agriculture, you're eating from the earth. And I think that's very crucial. And also even the idea that mankind itself kind of came out of Africa potentially. So I think that, that's a crucial artery. And that from there, Western civilization went out into Rome. Eastern civilization went out into Persia and then spread into China. And I think it's such a crucial strategic geopolitical point that people can't ignore.
Do you think that does that change the age of what people think is Atlantis from being like pre-Younger Dryas to afterwards then as well?
I think it is. I think Atlantis is old, yes. But I don't think it has to be specifically to what Plato says. And I don't even think you need the Younger Dryas, because if you're talking about a small city-state that's like a palace moat system, similar to like Angkor Wat. Let's say Atlantis was more like Angkor Wat, but bigger, or similar to the round city of Baghdad that was pretty much destroyed by the Mongols. But that city is called Zalam, I think it was called, similar to like Solam or Zalam, city of peace. So that architects who designed that city in Baghdad may have been originally inspired by an older source, and possibly from Plato, possibly from other Islamic sources, which in Islamic traditions, they also talk about this civilization was destroyed, the city of Ad or Iram. And of course, people again take those place names and fit it too literal to the original, to those place names like in Saudi Arabia. But come on, Saudi Arabia is a complete desert. There aren't any major rivers. There's no way you can establish a major civilization. So the word Iram and Ad must have come from an original source. And we know Egypt was the most powerful empire in that time, before the Phoenicians. And we know linguistic anthropologists tell us that the origins of language, specifically written language, almost every Western script and Indian script derived from an inspiration from Egyptian hieroglyphs. This has actually been documented by many linguistic anthropologists. And I think it's Professor Dr. Michael S. Heiser has also emphasized is that something is coming out of Egypt, and we know that language somehow was dispersed. So the idea when the Bible says the Tower of Babel, well, maybe it wasn't Babylon, but maybe there's some reference that there was a tower. Well, what civilization could build towers? Okay, a ziggurat ain't that impressive to me as an architect, okay, landscape architect. Now, an obelisk tower like the one in Washington, D.C., why did the Freemasons make a giant obelisk tower in Washington, D.C.? Because they wanted to emphasize, the Freemasons want to emphasize the idea of Neo-Atlantis, the resurrection, which an obelisk symbolizes resurrection of a civilization and a connection with God, connection with the supernatural. So that's where I think that if you're talking about this tower, I feel like a solar obelisk tower would be the original source. But over time, other cultures like the Sumerians and the Persians, they take those stories and they fit it to their lands, their identity. So the whole issue with Russia and Ukraine, they're trying to control who is the real identity of that land, So that has been going on for thousands of years in geopolitics. So this idea of cross-pollination of languages is the problem. And this is why we can't take Plato too literal, but there are some major clues that Plato gives us. But it's not just Plato we should look to. There are other legends too. Legend of Dwarka, legend of Shambhala, Agartha, Asgard, All these have
Hyperborea.
original. Yeah, all these names have an original source, and we can know through migration patterns that 10,000 years ago the population was very small. So in the hundreds of thousands to maybe a few million over the whole planet. So, but the most concentrated population region in the world at that time, in area-wise, wasn't China. It was actually Egypt. It was such a perfect place. And the temperature was cooler back then, 10,000 years ago, but it was still dry. It's also debatable the idea of the greening of the Sahara.
That's what I was going to ask you that a while ago. If it was a desert, really, or
I think Jimmy is being a little misleading here when he says, "Oh, the greening of the Sahara." Okay, as a landscape designer, when I'm researching this, I'm like, okay, like green as in like Arizona green. Because that's basically what it was back 10,000 years ago. Yes, there are plants, but not abundant amounts of vegetation like Missouri. Okay, no, it was still an arid desert, but the most densely planted region was in the black soil, and that was the Nile Delta fan in the river valley of the Nile.
And that's what's that island in the river that you point to in your second
The
video
island itself, I think, would be modeled off based on what we know in other precedents of ancient moat systems, like the ones in Japan, the imperial palace of Japan, imperial city of China, and also Persian gardens. We see this idea of moat systems, imperial moat systems. So I think I think Atlantis was designed in a circular form, and I think it was an imperial palace moat system in an island on the river. So if that's the
Nile,
case,
the
Nile. And I do think it was it was in the region of Cairo, somewhere in Cairo. The problem is, people aren't going to let those stones go to waste. They're going to use them up, especially if it's all mostly limestone. Only the monuments would be megaliths. The majority of the city would be limestone.
And then what about your analogy on your theory on the pillars of Hercules being in Italy instead? Because when you show that, I don't know if that's your theory, but it was in one of your videos.
No, yeah.
But it was interesting because you showed the Mediterranean with the different sea level. You could see the elevations below, and there's that whole spot of was it Greece that seems like it would have been above water. That whole area of the the northern Mediterranean. I feel like that would have been
just the coastlines. Noah's already mapped this out, and they've mapped it to, maybe, for example, the Nile Delta fan goes out, let's say 10,000 years ago, it would go out another 10 to 20 miles. That's the estimate.
Yeah, that's a lot. Like, so Crete might not have been. I guess
stuff.
Crete might not have been an island. I guess is what I'm saying.
And the topography there is quite a bit different. It's very sharp and on the cliff sides and bluffs, so it's not as fanned out. So the sea level rise wouldn't be as significant. The drop level of that. So I don't. It still would be islands there. There would be a bunch of islands. The idea of the pillars of Hercules, sometimes it can be so vague to the point of meaning just the juxtaposition between two islands, that threshold space between islands or mountains. And the Greeks didn't really know, the early Greeks like Solon didn't really know about the so-called pillars of Hercules. That wasn't named until the Phoenicians got over there. And then the Romans are the ones that really advertised that to be the new pillars of Hercules. So
you're thinking the pillars could have been just basically two islands or two land masses that you're going between?
That's how the ancients would have seen it. They would have said sometimes they might be a little monument there to Hercules, and there will be a little temple there, and that would refer to that temple as a pillar, and showing this kind of political threshold space. Like, this is the Greek world order. Once you cross this, the Greeks really don't control this, and it's more mysterious. So anything beyond the pillars of Hercules can refer to that connection near Istanbul. The straits around there could be seen as pillars of Hercules, or anything past Crete, because they could see those spaces between those islands. But when you go way out to the Mediterranean, you're really pushing it far out to a point where the majority of Greeks did not know about that land until the Phoenicians started exploring it. And where did the Phoenicians come from? Well, the Phoenicians are a derivative from the Egyptians. Even the Jews, the original Jews were not, white Russian Europeans. They were from Egypt, and they would have looked very different. So that's why I think people get this so confused, is when you keep wanting to push it out to the Atlantic. But we know based off migration patterns of population densities that there's a specific point source. And that's where this idea of the fanning out, where Egypt is almost like the perfect symbol for that. It fans out into Europe and into Persia and Iran, that region.
What was that spot? What was that spot northern of Italy? Sorry to interrupt you. That bit northern, not northern Italy, western Italy, past Sicily and
those two islands. I think it was,
you don't think that's Atlantis?
No, it's too arid. You have to have rivers. I feel like it's the first thing you have to start with. If you don't have any major rivers, you can't move megaliths. The Egyptians moved 1,000 tons of obelisk using the water. They were able to make large barges. We know that historically that they were able to do that. It's hard to find evidence of that because that would have been so valuable that the Romans took it all away, or the Persians took it all away. That's the problem. But there is some evidence to point that the Egyptians were able to do this, move megalithic, structures because of water. And if you're in a rocky island like the Azores or the islands, I forgot the name of them, west of Italy, it's just not a very good place to build a civilization. You can build some megaliths there. Yeah, there are some there. But also even the idea of megalithic knowledge, architectural knowledge. I mean, Freemasons really believe this. They can't prove it, of course, either. But they do believe that Egypt is the source of architectural knowledge. That the idea of being able to figure out how do you move a 5-ton block. Okay, 1 ton, maybe cultures from other regions of the world could figure it out, like Easter Island. It's basalt. It's not as heavy, But, a granite 5-ton block, you have to have mechanical systems. You have to have rope. You have to have copper. You have to have designers to figure this out, managers,
logistics.
All the logistics. And they weren't just done by slaves. They were done by people who passionately wanted to do this, but they were paid in food, bartering as well. So, but until later Egypt, then they resorted to slavery, it looks like, because they got their pride a little too high there. So I do think Atlantis was in Egypt, and I don't believe the mainstream archaeologists when they say, oh, it's Santorini, the supermassive volcano. No, that doesn't go far back in time. And we know that civilization goes farther back in time because of Göbekli Tepe. But it is possible that the Santorini Thera eruption is the catalyst for the Exodus. The dates are so close. Okay, but they're 200 years apart. Well, what's your margin of error? Okay, I'm finding luminescence datings that's like 500 years apart. So, and they're not.
So that was the collapse. Like you're saying, that was the collapse of that age is Santorini there.
I think the Thera eruption was the beginning of the collapse of the Bronze Age collapse.
Yeah.
That also basically was the beginning of the end of Egypt and the beginning of Rome and Greece.
I mean, that's so close too. I mean, Egypt to Greece. I mean, if something popped off and that whole mountain exploded. I mean, that's pretty huge.
And the jet stream flows would have gone from west to east. Yes, so they would have experienced that ash, and they would experience the tsunamis there. But that's still, I don't think that is the catalyst. That's like the second phase of the destruction of Atlantis, or Neo-Atlantis. The Egyptian dynastic periods I could refer to as Neo-Atlantis, but they didn't rebuild Atlantis. They started to build the Pyramid Age. Whereas Atlantis may have just been a city-state in the river system in the beginning of the Pyramid Age. And I also do think there is some connection a little bit with the more controversial aspects of the so-called Aryan race, which I don't think is referring to white people. Okay, I think it's something a little more mysterious, a little more freaky, connection with the giants as well. I do think there's some connection with that, but I think more evidence has to come up. But again, I would refer to maybe Dr. Michael S. Heiser on that, because he does think that there's some weird connection with many mythologies. Even Native Americans have them, these lost kind of race of humans that were like mutant humans. And if you believe in the supernatural, if you believe these UFOs or the paranormal things, angels and demons are screwing with mankind, it's possible they tried to tamper with humans, and then they did it in a very strategic location, because they're not all powerful. Maybe they're limited in their power. So maybe they tried to mutate humans in Egypt and create this Atlantean race, these 6-fingered, elongated skulls. Potentially they were just a minority, because if they're a majority, we would have found a lot more evidence, and it would be a lot harder for the government to cover it up. But if it does seem like there's some connection, but I do disagree with YouTubers like Atlantean Gardens, who really is a little bit more of a white nationalist. I'm going to have to say it. But he has done research to show that there is something to this Aryan race idea. It's not something the Nazis just made up. It's something that goes back farther in history. There is a connection with the Bible, and there's a connection with the supernatural and the paranormal, and possibly.
Well, it's
Native
also
Americans.
in the Vedics too, right? I mean, they talk about that. So.
Yeah, so there's a lot of civilizations that reference this. There are these giant humans. I don't think, some evangelicals want to say, oh, they're 30-foot tall giants. No. Okay, every Native American legend, every article from the 18th century is always shown that it's something like 7 to 8 feet. Okay, it's not giant, but still, that's abnormal. And it's very consistent that you're finding all the dozens of articles in the 18th and 19th century are pointing to some unusual race of humans that were abnormally tall. And it's possibly they were dispersed out of the Garden of Eden, out of Atlantis, due to a major natural disaster that the Islamic tradition hints at as well.
The one after the Younger Dryas, like a 7800 BC, I think you had it in one of your maps.
Yes. There's new research pointing that there was a major tsunami deposit around Israel and Egypt around 7000 BC. So this is where I think you don't need, the Younger Dryas was the catalyst of the beginning sort of like civilization. It actually kickstarted civilization. It wasn't the catalyst to destroy civilization. It really somehow kickstarted. It killed off the saber-toothed tigers, killed off the woolly mammoths, all the big animals that were, very nasty and wanted to kill us probably. And I agree with Graham Hancock. We did not kill off all the mammoths. Okay, that's a bunch of bullshit. I took some anthropology, at the University of Iowa, and I just never fell for that. I'm like, really? I don't think we could do that. Our populations were just too small. But if Plato references elephants, so I use that as clue. I'm like, okay, well, that's hinting to Africa, and I feel like mankind kind of sort of came out of Africa, and I feel like Egypt is such a strategic artery for people to get out of Africa. Everybody in Africa would have to go through that corridor, that highway, in order to get out. There's only really two directions towards the.
You can't go. You can't go west. You have to go through the Middle East, right? Basically.
Yeah, you basically have to go up. Yeah,
follow the coastline of the Mediterranean.
The current theory is that the Gulf of Aden, which is another reference to the Aten, Eden, or Eden. There's a linguistic connection there, I believe. But they went out that direction. But I don't believe so. I think they would have followed more the Nile. Would have been easier because it's flat. There's only a few areas where you have to go down some cliff sides of the waterfalls. So overall, but the water also flows, it's very unusual for rivers. It flows from south to north. So if they had small little boats and canoes and stuff, they would easily be able to float down that way, and they just have to kind of meander around the waterfall regions and then get back on their boats using ropes and stuff, as we do today when people are exploring the Nile. So yeah, the river, the direction of the flow of the river forces people to go that direction because of the way boats flow downstream. Well, in this case, it's going north, so it's a little unusual. It's the only major river in the world that does that. It's very unusual, and that's why we have this idea that European civilizations seem to be more advanced. Well, the reason is they were closer to Egypt. They were closer to Atlantis. So it's the geographic proximity that gave kind of birth to European culture to really explode out, but not just European culture, Chinese culture as well. But they took a little bit longer route, of course, but they also probably followed the coastlines. Most migration patterns tend to follow the coastlines to stay safe. And once they, the Chinese hypothesis with Egypt is a little more complicated. I can't remember.
Well, yeah, because I feel like the Chinese must have been way older, right? I mean, I feel like they must have been
I don't
older.
think so.
Could they have evolved? Could they evolve as Asians in only 10,000 years? Or I mean, how is that?
Well, look at dogs and cats. We can hybridize them, and in some way through breeding very easily, and they change very quickly. So humans can do that too. They can change very quickly.
Yeah, through hybridization. Yeah, that's
hybridization.
Fair enough. Yeah. So
have you ever heard? It's possible.
Have you ever heard of Fenton's work, Bruce Fenton's work into Africa, or is that prior to like I feel like you're talking about out of Africa being fairly recently, but Fenton's work was destroying the main Bruce Fenton, because he kind of said that the articles that people are relying on, the studies that people are relying on for this out of Africa theory have been debunked, and it's really just a paradigm that's sticking around for no reason. Like he thinks that it came from Australasia, more of like Australia, like where they found the Hobbit bones and stuff.
That's really going back. I mean, at that point, I really don't care because that's going back really
like
far
50, 60,000 years, whatever. Yeah.
No, like millions of years. Well, yeah, okay, the Hobbit, it did exist around 50,000 years ago. But it doesn't really matter because there was really I don't believe there was any advanced civilization before the Younger Dryas.
Oh, you don't?
It was the Younger Dryas that kickstarted us somehow, affecting the climate and everything, killing off the dangerous animals, except the ones in Africa and Australia, I guess. But there's so much evidence.
So what about Cremo's out of place artifacts and stuff? Does that give you any pause to sort of reevaluating? Like,
I haven't found too many. I've actually personally seen the London Hammer in Texas. Wasn't too impressed. I mean, the evangelicals want to promote it and say, "Oh, look, this is proof. Mankind walked with dinosaurs and stuff like that." Yeah, I don't think so. No, I don't go to that kind of extreme on the conspiracies or ideas. I just there's no need to. Like, I mean. I'm a Christian, but I still follow basic science. And there is a lot of evidence for out of Africa when it comes to hominids. We're finding so many hominids in Africa, and we have millions of people that live hundreds of millions in Europe, but we haven't found that many bones that's going back millions of years. You think you would run into them. If there's hundreds of millions of people living in Europe, you think eventually someone would run in a bulldozer, but we haven't found anything. But you go in Africa where population density is even smaller, but you haven't already run across dozens of hominids. So that's where I'm thinking, okay, the probability seems a lot higher in Africa. So, but it really doesn't matter because civilization itself didn't start until about, after the Younger Dryas. And that's where it doesn't really matter if we came out of Africa or Australia. Okay, eventually they're going to find the most suitable location.
Right.
It's not that the Egypt is close to Africa and the hominids all stayed in Africa and they evolved and they established Atlantis. No, I mean, that's going back millions of years and that really doesn't matter. It's just that the people just tend to cluster around coastlines. And they happen to be a strategic location. It's the geographic determinism factors that lead a civilization to pop up real quickly. And Egypt is such a dense area with abundant amounts of silt and agriculture in such a confined space that's very defined. This idea of a garden, a very enclosed space, it forces a civilization to interact more. The different native tribes of southern Egypt and northern Egypt had to collide. They warred with each other. They fucked with each other. All that stuff, and they gave birth to a civilization. And then they warred and fucked again.
Do you think that the Garden of Eden is Egypt then, or the Fertile Crescent, or
no? The Garden of Eden is definitely Egypt's Nile Delta River, the valley, in that whole area. Yes, because it literally is. Going back to the word Eden means desert. Garden. As a landscape, architect, I look at garden means a defined space. And that green space has been there for tens of thousands of years. And, the Sahara has fluctuated from savanna to desert for, hundreds of thousands of years, if not millions. It's about 3 million years when it was actually truly tropical. Okay, that's what most geologists and professors who study this stuff. They say, when you go back 3 million years ago, Sahara was like a jungle, okay, like the Amazon. But no, going back 10,000 years ago, it was actually more arid because there was less water in the atmosphere because it was locked up in the ice age. So, and it was just coming out. So people were fleeing. Everybody in Africa was trying to find an oasis, and they're literally fleeing to this large oasis sticking out of the Middle East. You can't go. You really can't. You either have to go south, which is hard because the rivers flow one direction. So the rivers are forcing people to go a certain direction because the fish also tend to flow in that direction, depending on their migration patterns, and the animals will flow with that direction too to get those resources. So the direction of the water and the cliff sides of the Nile Valley really is conducive for a civilization to pop up. And it starts to build a population. It comes down to population, basically. Egypt was a very populated region. Even to this day, it is lit up because there's nowhere to go. They're trapped within the garden, and that's what made Atlantis so vulnerable. They were trapped literally by their own paradise.
Darren, do you have any questions before I keep going?
No, you go ahead. I'm it's good. I like it. I mean, the race thing could be because you're not talking about like 10,000 people fucking trudging over into China. You might have had like 20 people show up in China. It might have been one clan. Might have been one clan that all look the same. It's like if all the fucking Dunlops show up someplace, everyone's going to look kind of Dunlopy, you know? They're going to have that Graham look to them.
Yeah, well, I mean, they do. I sort of agree with.
Plus, evolution happens fast, I think, in some of those senses. Like, you know, it seems pretty clear that the more sun you're exposed to, the more melanin your skin's going to eventually start to produce. The farther north you go and start dealing with winter and stuff like that, the less melanin your skin's going to produce. I mean, I think it could happen fast, and that the population, you got to think that 10,000 years ago is maybe what, 1/1000th of 1% what it is now. So
they estimate that Egypt specifically, I know, but like Anatolia, they had small city states that were emerging at Göbekli, not city states, but settlements, I guess, Göbekli Tepe, and they had probably maybe 5,000 people or more.
Because there was only 2 billion people on this. What was the population in like 1985?
1985? It was under.
Let's say 6 billion, maybe.
I think it was less than that, wasn't it? Or what was the population in 1950?
Maybe 6 then. I mean, it was 5. Yeah.
I'll look it up right now. I bet you it's like, I bet you in 1950 it was less than half of what it is right now.
Well, yeah. You got to keep in mind that our population mainly exploded because of the discovery of oil, and that the chain reaction really exploded our population.
Electricity too, oil.
Yeah, but yeah, China has always had a massive population going back thousands of years, but their civilization really didn't start to around, I would say, maybe 3000 BC.
All right, let's get some guesses, bitches. 1950. What do you think the population was?
Let's see.
4.8.
5.5.
You guys are way high.
What?
Way high.
3.5.
Still way high.
3.2.
You're still way high.
In 1950,
the population is the world population in 1950 is 2.536 million.
Wow.
So now billion. Sorry, yeah, billion.
Yeah, I know. In 1900, it was like only 1.2 billion.
Yeah.
So then you go back to like even 1800, which is fucking 200 years ago, right?
Mm-hmm.
So in 1800, what am I doing? I'm too high. Not high enough. All right, 1800. I mean, obviously, this isn't going to be bang on or anything like that.
Yeah, the farther I go back in time you go, the less accuracy.
The less it's going to be, but around 1 billion in 1800. So the population's gone up tenfold in 200 years. So now multiply that by 10 twice. And you're getting back to 10,000 years ago, right? Or you multiply it by 50.
Well, you can't go by that rate, though, because the rate really jumped in the 20th century. I mean, 19th century, because of the Industrial Revolution and everything, and discovery.
Oh, yeah. And how much do you think it jumped?
A bunch of old people started living longer than.
How much do you think it jumped with agriculture and stuff like that? You know what I mean? Like, I think it's feasible to think that 10,000 years ago, you're talking about, a couple of million.
Over the whole planet.
Yeah, over the entire planet.
Yeah. But in the regions of like Europe and the Middle East, that's what you're trying to say, where would be the densest region? And when people think, some people want to believe Europe is the origin of all civilization. I'm like, Europe was under ice. I mean, it was cold. It's not a conducive place to live. Yes, there was agriculture. There's little sporadic gardens people would have.
So what about multiple? If you're only going back, I guess it's tough because you don't think there's multiple civilizations, but there seems to be evidence that up in Tehuacan and up in Peru and stuff like that those high elevations, there was civilizations going on there as well. Do you think it's possible that we were holed up in Africa and Peru and Australia and places like this, waiting out the ice age?
No, I still think that the Americans, civilizations, they basically came from Polynesia, possibly some from Europe, the pre-Celtic civilizations of the Solutreans. But yeah, I don't believe that there was a civilization over 20,000 years in South America. Now, there may have been people, but I don't think there was enough population to really kickstart it. Cahokia, the Mound Builder civilization, really didn't get started until around 3000 BC. And it wasn't until around 2000 BC that Poverty Point was really established. And then the population about, I think they estimate maybe 10,000 people may have lived at Poverty Point. And that was a big mountain there in Louisiana. But so it takes a while because you got to get those populations to interact. And the problem with America is it was just so vast. And the populations did start in the old world, and they were migrating in multiple migration waves, some by boat, probably some through the Bering Strait, some probably from Europe, even, I believe. But it took a while for that to happen. But they seem to hold on to similar legends, as Dr. Michael S. Heiser, I keep saying. He's the linguistic anthropologist that seems he thinks that there's some kind of linguistic connection, that their legend seems to be hinting something similar to what the Bible's referencing and to what Shambhala, Agartha is also referencing. So where did they get that idea?
Well, Dave Matheson would say that they all got it from the stars. And that's the reason that these myths around the world, because you got the very sort of specific constellations that have been dancing around us for forever and ever. What's the one he likes so much? Ophiuchus. He's going to listen to this, so I got to shout out to Ophiuchus.
Okay, what's more impressive? A star that barely moves in the sky, or unidentified ball of light coming in your face and playing hocus pocus at you in the middle of the night? What's going to affect the civilization more? Something that's going to freak you out more. Okay, so people did, worship the star, use the star, not worship the stars, but yeah, they referenced
Well, they
the
did.
stars.
They worship the sun. I mean, it all goes back to the sun gods, Solon and the sun gods and all.
The Egyptians, this is a misconception that even Freemasons are trying to kind of explain to people, that the Egyptians did not worship the sun in the sense of, that big ball of light has intelligence, it has agency, it has a will. No, it understood that it repeats, does the same thing over and over and never freaking changes. Rarely. And they can sort of, the earth tilts a little bit with precession, all that. Yeah, there's some adjustments and all that, but it doesn't do anything to freak you out. Okay, so when you see a ball of light with intelligence, they correlate that supernatural creature, that UFO, with the sun, because they're saying these solar beings with wings, they use the sun as a symbol to describe actual supernatural creatures that they were trying to summon. When you build pyramids, the idea is not a connection with the stars. The idea is a connection with actual supernatural freaky creatures. Okay, shamans, like at Poverty Point, at Cahokia, they would build these giant mounds, and they would actually try to summon supernatural creatures. And the way they do it sometimes is evil ways. Okay, you do human sacrifice by the thousands, chop off a baby's head and throw it down the pyramid, okay, to get these creatures' attention. And sometimes it worked, and sometimes it didn't. And I practiced this experiment. I didn't chop off a baby's head.
What? Jesus Christ, Peter.
Just my dog.
But I used a flashlight, and I kept signaling over and over and over. Eventually, I got something to respond, and it freaked me out. Okay, this was a big ball of red light, and I could tell it had agency. And then about 2 weeks later, it appears to my sister and freaks her out. I called MUFON, explained the whole case to them. So yeah, there's actual weird phenomenons that with agency, with intelligence, that the ancients were very aware of. The Egyptians were very aware of. And of course, people get so mixed in with the art and the symbolism. You got to put that all aside and go back to the original source. What do the Japanese say? Yokais. How do they describe yokais? As these fiery kind of substance things, these things that wisp around. Well, what do the Celts call them? They call them will-o'-the-wisps. And they refer to them as orbs of light. What is Tinkerbell? The original author who made Tinkerbell wasn't female. It was a ball of light. It was symbolized a fairy. Okay, what do the Muslims say? They say jinns are like beings of fiery nature. in the Bible, the idea of the tongues of fire of the Holy Spirit. These could be angels or the essence of the Holy Spirit coming down with intelligence. Okay, there's something to this characteristics that's very consistent. And now we see it by the Pentagon. The Pentagon showing these balls of light, these things that can morph in shape. And okay, so there is a connection to all this. And given another 50 years, there's going to be papers coming out of universities that are going to start to describe very specific characteristics on the supernatural. So the ancients built these temples is a way to connect with the supernatural. They were able to figure out there's something beyond the sun, but they're using the sun as a symbol of these divine creatures, these Anunnaki, these Atens, the hidden one. That's what and the word Aten means hidden one or to reveal. So the sun's a perfect symbol for that. The sun hides and then comes back up, just like these UFOs that poof in and poof out and play hocus pocus with you. So the Egyptians had they experienced similar phenomena. So they represent that in art. But over time, the art gets in the way. Even today, people get so confused on how you depict Jesus, okay, or how do you depict God? Okay, is it a triangle? Is it Illuminati? Okay, well, what does triangle refer to? It represents geometry, represents order. So,
they take over symbols too, and even like the Aryan race, for example, like it was never supposed to be the way they say now. Aryan's got a very bad connotation. That wasn't what it was supposed to be in the theosophical writings or in the Vedic literature, or or the swastika. They take over the swastika now. Even calling like that
even the swastika was the sun symbol.
Yeah, I mean,
not anymore though. Not anymore. We ain't getting that one back ever.
That's what I mean. No, you never get it back.
Don't even try. We don't even want it back, Graham. Why do you want it back? You're talking about aliens and swastikas. Jesus Christ! I don't like where this is going.
I just don't want to lose anymore.
What?
Just they're taking ISIS away from us too. I mean, it's all getting taken away.
Yeah. Well, symbols change depending on which political person has the power to change that symbol. Yeah. But there is an original source, and you can go back far enough in time, and you do your research. People like Graham Hancock have kind of figured this out. There is some essence of something spiritual going on that's having a material effect on people.
You should get a sun symbol tattooed on your chest, Graham.
We'll see
how that goes for you at the beach.
I don't want those back. I just don't want to lose any more. Like freedom, soon enough, freedom's going to be evil, and that's going to be gone. Like can't even say the word freedom anymore.
Freedom's always been evil. I don't mind. That's why look at me. I look evil. I'm fine. I'm fine with it. I'm fine with being evil.
So even since you're a Christian, I mean, was Christ an initiate?
I'm sorry, I kept saying Jesus Christ.
Or
that
was he?
Sorry, I don't.
Even Jesus wasn't Jesus' original name. I mean, it's a title.
Did he come from Egypt as well? Because I mean, some people say that the Book of the Dead was the analogy for the resurrection. I mean, the Book of the Dead was talking about the resurrection, and the resurrection of Jesus was built off that. And
well, the cultic Christians wanted to keep their identity, politically and religiously, but they also wanted to adopt a new religion. They said, well, what if we, take our symbols and apply it to Jesus? And it rightfully so, because maybe Jesus really is, let's say in Buddhist tradition, he really is the avatar of God, a body incarnated, that God put his essence or his spirit of some sense and appeared in human form. And this is referenced in a lot of ancient religions, that the supernatural has the ability to somehow do this now, but not to certain levels or abilities. Let's say, a demonic spirit might be able to make a ball in your house move, but maybe you can't teleport a Bigfoot in your house. Okay. But they can make cryptids. Okay. So, and the ancients did believe that, the supernatural has these abilities. So God, appears in his avatar body of Jesus to kind of reassure what people already sort of believed that the supernatural can do. But now he's proving it in a real historical sense. And, Jesus isn't just a copy off of Horus and all that. Those are just symbols reapplied to emphasize Jesus. That's how the Vatican looks at it. That's why they have an obelisk. An obelisk is the perfect symbol to show that idea of resurrection, to show the geometry, the creator of God, all that. So an obelisk is the perfect symbol. And what better way than to have an obelisk from the original Garden of Egypt, the Garden of Eden. So yes, the Vatican is adopting and culturally appropriating other legends and applying it to something actually that historically actually happened. So yeah,
was he an initiate? Do you think do you think he was initiated? Did he travel around and go to the mystery schools? Travel around India at all?
Even for Jesus, I mean, unless he uses powers to teleport around, possibly. But no, I think God appeared in Jesus in a strategic location at the right time and moment in history, because he knew that's about the time when Rome is reaching its peak. Okay, God didn't put his avatar body in the middle of Canada. Okay, I don't think it's going to spread civilization that quickly over there. I mean, I don't know. I'm sorry to put a bad rap on Canada, or Australia. Okay, it'd be a bad place to try to poof God's avatar in Australia, but near the edge of Rome, that's strategic. So it's all.
So has it happened? Has it happened before that and since then?
I don't think so.
So
no, I don't think, because
Muhammad,
again, population.
or Muhammad or Buddha or
Krishna,
Krishna,
I do think that the supernatural did appear to Muhammad, and I think it appeared to Buddha, but in a different way that wasn't quite as impactful on geopolitics. Well, it sort of was. The Muslims definitely were, right? But with Muhammad, I believe he really did see an angel of some sort, and that really messed with him and, completely affected civilization. And that could be also part of a larger master plan we don't see. And one way I look at religion is you could say, the Holy Trinity, the Father, Son, Holy Spirit. Okay, the Father is Islam, the Son is Christianity, the Holy Spirit is Buddhism or Hinduism combined together. So there's this kind of universal connection. But there's an ultimate source, the right path that leads you to that. Yeah. So those religions are evolving from, an original source. I think all major religions did come out of Egypt. Okay, the idea of the sun god. Well, I mean, yes, the sun's a perfect symbol. People will start to worship it, but the real initiative, the priests, the priestesses, they would have realized that the sun isn't the god. It's just the symbol. But maybe the common people of those, their civilization, they literally thought that was the god, but they didn't know the deeper symbolism.
Yeah, but I like your your description of the UFOs and the fireballs in that, because that I think that's what we have to bring, is these phenomena that we see that generally aren't just part of our age, but that would have gone back, and what would have they been like when they saw these different craft, or different, like you said, a ball of fire that has its own will, it seems. I mean, we had Terry Ray on. This is way back now.
Terry Tabando?
Speaking
Terry Ray.
This keeps popping up because you might want to write this one down too, the invasion of the orange orbs. And he tracked all of MUFON. Was it MUFON or the other Peter Davenport's website, his database? I can't remember what it's called, MUFORC maybe, or UFORC or something, But he put all the orange orb sightings into a database, and he tracked them all, time and place. And I mean, they were coming from 3 different areas. So a lot of them were at the same time of night, and they'd come from Catalina Island and that area. Patterns, and there was patterns of these orange orbs. Mm-hmm. And I mean, he never got the acknowledgement, I don't think, from the UFO community or the
What's his name again?
Putting that book. It's Terry Ray, Invasion of the Orange Orbs.
We had him on for episode 100.
Episode 100, yeah. So that's going way back. That's like probably in 2014, 2015. Yeah. But yeah, just because you saw the orange orb too. And I mean, if you're summoning these, and then
mine was
red. Yeah, okay, red.
I think there is. I think the colors are symbolic. I think they do use colors to mess with people.
Yeah.
Like they're not just limited to colors. They could be almost invisible.
Because you would be trying to summon those, right? Yeah.
Yeah,
well,
it worked. I don't recommend it.
That's kind of what he suggested, is that it could be a cloaking device as well. That orange orb is a cloak.
I really wanted to believe, like when I first got into UFOs, I really wanted to believe in the extraterrestrial hypothesis. But then I started to realize they're really just Hollywood indoctrinating me, making me want to believe that they're ETs. Because then, if they're ETs, then we can fuck with them and get evolve and hybridize and be advanced and powerful. Like that seems like the mindset.
Or defend from an invasion.
But the more I looked into it, the more I started to realize that it's not fitting to the behavior of this phenomenon. Would an advanced civilization come light years away just to play hocus pocus with me at 10 o'clock at night? I mean, yeah, the behavior doesn't fit the pragmatic idea of a civilization coming for harvesting resources. Okay, if they're going to come, they're going to come a billion times more in the sense of affecting civilization than Columbus affected the Indians. Okay, things would be drastically different if aliens really did come and affect us. Okay,
Or they're going to be like
be very different.
filming us
But they're
like the planet Earth. They'll be like filming me. I'll be putting on a show too.
Season 3.
Tell her the way
This is the last season of Planet Earth because they're either going to blow themselves up or leave the planet.
I can't believe that fucking old bastard's still kicking. I hope they could just digitize his voice though, because I don't really want to listen to anyone else tell me about nature other than
that guy,
Attenborough.
At this point. Yeah. You know, I grew up in like the heyday of National Geographic. I remember staying up late every Sunday night to watch National Geographic Explorer. Came on at 9:00, and it was always my boy David Attenborough talking. I mean, me and my kids are talking about this Nile cruise we're going on when we go to Egypt. I mean, you might as well just come to Egypt with us, Peter.
You're going on a cruise in Egypt?
Well, we've got a trip going. We've got.
Isn't there a movie coming out about that? Like the cruise on the Nile, and there's some murders going on. I
hope no one gets murdered. We're doing our Egypt Contact at the Cabin trip this November 12th to 26th. We got a bunch of people. We got a bunch of crazy special permissions. So we got we'll be able to access all the chambers of the Great Pyramid. We'll have access to the Great Pyramid after hours for just our group. We're going underground at the Serapeum. There's a whole itinerary. Yeah, if you go over to unchartedx.com/tour, it's got the itinerary for the trip that we're doing this year with the Snake Bros and Ben from Uncharted X.
Ben, yeah.
But I was thinking, he's a buddy of ours. We were just hanging out with him in Randall Carlson, actually. Funny enough, down in the Scablands of Washington in fall. But me and my kids are talking about the Nile cruise part of it. And I'm like, I could just hear David Attenborough's voice just explaining the Nile perch coming up, and the Nile perch.
We're going to
if I could do it, I'd be doing it.
The Sphinx, the Step Pyramid, Osiris Shaft, the Red Pyramid, Bent Pyramid, Abu Sir.
One idea I had on Atlantis is, if we can't find the remnants of Atlantis, is it possible that all the stones we see in Egypt were reclamated? For example, the three main pyramids of Egypt. What if those stones, some of them were the stone walls of Atlantis? And they said, well, Atlantis is pretty much sinking now. We can't rebuild the island. It's just too much work. Let's do something different. Maybe Atlantis originally had an obelisk tower in the center. And that was the inspiration for Tower of Babel, and that fell and everything collapsed. And so what if they took those stones to recreate Neo-Atlantis, but this time it was a pyramid age? Not just a solar obelisk tower and a moat city-state. So I do think that it's possible that, some of the remnants of the pyramids could be remnants of Atlantis. Some of the remnants in Heliopolis, different temples of Egypt, all those stones could be aspects of Atlantis. And that's why you sort of can argue that, because we know that many stones, as Brian Forster has shown, that there's a lot of recycling going on. Even at Tanis, Brian Forster visits. I don't know, you guys probably heard of him, right?
Yes.
Yeah. And he's shown, and I agree with him as a designer, that it looks like these things have been reshaped, recut, and possibly. I mean, people might say, "Well, we know where the quarry is for the pyramids." Yes, but maybe that same quarry was used for Atlantis. So there's a lot of overlap, and that's what complicates the legend.
Do you think they're functional? The pyramids? Was it a
I believe it's a master plan.
Sensory deprivation chamber at all, or anything, or what do you think it was?
And I don't really agree with everything. Like the YouTuber, what's his name? Ancient Architects. He argues about the pyramids trying to be a machine. Even he starts to disagree. He's like, maybe this doesn't make any sense. No, I do think there were definitely tombs, but not for one pharaoh. If I were a pharaoh, I'm like, hey, dude, that guy made a big ass pyramid. I'm gonna take his body out and replace it. And have my relatives go in there. So I do think it's a pyramid, pyramid for a tomb, but also could be like a throne room. I think it may have been used like a throne room. And I also do agree with what's his name? Ralph Ellis, the author Ralph Ellis. He argues that like the original Mount Sinai, I don't think was in Sinai Peninsula. I think that name was changed its location. I think the real Mount Sinai was the Great Pyramids. And that's where Moses went, because he was Egyptian, and that was the essence of the pyramid of God. Those pyramids are a monument to God and the pharaohs, an essence of the supernatural, as well as a monument to their civilization. And I do think it's part of a master plan. I do think, as Robert Bavau kind of points out, there seems to be a connection with Orion's belt and the layout. It's not perfect, of course. They make mistakes, but I do think there is an overall master plan that multiple pharaohs were trying to keep to. It's not like they were trying to completely obliterate the last pharaoh. In some cases, yes, but a few of them did honor their past. Okay, people do have some pride and honor for their past, and they want to keep those monuments and expand the monuments and keep presenting that master plan of Orion's belt, and to reference Osiris. So yeah, but I don't think it's a machine. No, it's just a bunch of blocks. Okay, but what's amazing is, it's an architectural wonder, and it's not. I don't believe it was done just by slave labor. I think they had to have mechanical systems. They used a lot of wood. They had metal. They had bronze, and potentially the pyramids, I do believe, is older than 3000 BC, possibly 5000 BC.
No, they clearly had engineering of some kind. I mean, the boxes underground at the, what's it called there?
Serapeum?
At the Serapeum are like fucking better than we could make today.
Yeah, I mean, we could probably make it, but we just don't have the will.
Well, yeah, we probably could. We just don't have the will.
Yeah.
We'd have to make a whole special machine. Like, you just have to make the biggest fucking crazy router you ever made, I guess.
Yeah. Yeah,
but that still wouldn't explain to, like, that shit Russ is showing you, where it looks like they literally just started scooping off the face of the rocks. Like, you can even see where the trowel came up on the far side, except it's all basalt. It's fucking crazy.
Yeah, the basalt ones are kind of crazy. Yeah, I have to look at that again. I think Ben was showing that.
Yeah, Ben and Russ has a presentation. Russ is going to come and do a show for us. But I mean, this has been great, Peter. I mean, an hour flew by. This has been fantastic. Oh, wow. You really know your stuff.
If you guys want me to come on, I can try to show some slides with a little bit more detail.
Yeah, that'd be great.
I can't remember everything.
No, that'd be great, because it's so good to have the visual of that area. Because even right now, I was looking at the maps and I thought, Egypt is so small compared to Saudi Arabia and that whole Africa. Like, Egypt is just this tiny little thing in the middle, right?
You can see it from the moon. You can see it from the moon, the Nile Delta.
Yeah. So we should do that. We'll do some visuals and we'll have you back on. I mean, what would be if you had to, if you could sort of do ground penetrating radar somewhere, or do some excavation, what would you choose in Egypt?
The islands on the Nile. Definitely. Islands on the Nile, or even under Cairo. I mean, they've found stuff under the city of Cairo, and the problem is things are just built on top of things, and that's the problem. But under Cairo and in the islands of the Nile, I bet there's some things about 30 feet below the silt.
There we go.
I think where the Great Pyramids are right now, it's near that location. It's near that quarry. It's near the Great Pyramids. That's where Atlantis, right at the front end of the Garden of Eden. But I hope people, really think about that. Those who are, religious or not religious, to really think of how that kind of connects, and maybe we're keep putting Atlantis back, way out in the Atlantic Ocean. And I do believe it's possible that maybe the Egyptians really did know that there was a lost continent out in the ocean. That was North and South America. That's Atlantis, sort of, in the continent sense. But then maybe the priest of Sias was getting a little confused with his own lost history of Egypt and conflating that. So that's when Solon maybe was placing that, or maybe Plato was reinterpreting it to be outside gates of Hercules, because maybe the priest did reference that there was a landmass, but there was also a separate story of a destructive city-state. So there may be two separate stories and that are put together over time. And that's the problem. Maybe that we have to kind of separate that out, or look at it in a different perspective that fits a little bit closer to what the mainstream archaeologists are saying, but at the same time also challenging that.
Right on. How can people get a hold of you or see your work?
They can just check out my YouTube channel at Enigma Seeker, and I think I have a Gmail listed under there.
Right on. Well, I don't know if you have an email on there, but they can message you on they can comment on your YouTube or something like that.
Yeah, I don't. Yeah. I'll see.
Are you, what are you doing these days? Like any fresh work? You said you might be working on a book or something, or?
Well, I think that's more like probably in my 40s. But yeah, right now I'm still kind of at the stage of still researching. I still need to see what, Graham Hancock and Brian Forster and others are finding, and kind of see how I can build upon that. Like Ralph Ellis, what's he writing in his books, and still learn from those guys. But as a landscape architect and or designer, and someone who has studied anthropology, I don't want to diverge. We don't have to diverge so far away from the mainstream archaeologists, but do present something that could actually capture the mainstream's attention, and it could be a solid argument. And I really hope people like Jimmy and Bright Insight, would present a hypothesis like that. It's not just my hypothesis. There's others that have kind of thought about this. So I'm just kind of building upon it.
Right on. Well, that sounds good. Yeah. We'll keep in touch, and we'll have you on for that videos. We'll do like more of a visual thing. And do it on video.
It's exciting. Right. World War III started, I think, during the podcast. So
okay,
exciting. If people ask, if the people ask, where were you when Russia invaded Ukraine? We were right here. Podcast.
We were talking about Atlantis and UFOs. I love the UFO part too. That's fantastic.
Right on, Peter. Thanks again for coming on the show. It's been a fantastic chat. It's always good to find a new guest that nobody's heard before. This will be exciting to get you out to the world, and hopefully soon we'll have you face to face arguing about Atlantis with Randall Carlson.
Oh man, that'd be cool.
I'll get you on Cosmographia face to face.
I'll probably be a little less abrasive on him, but that was on you guys.
No, it's all good.
Randall's he's a big old teddy bear.
All right, thanks, guys.
Thanks, buddy.
Okay.
Have a good day.
Ciao for now. And that was a chat with Peter. What'd you think?
No, I think it flew by.
It did fly by.
I wanted to stop him about 10 times during the UFOs and the ETs and interdimensional, and at the beginning of his Atlantis Egypt thing, I had about 10 questions, but I was like, no, I'm just going to let him go and get his thing out here, and then we'll sort of circle back possibly. But yeah, I thought that was great.
Yeah, it was good. That was a good one for sure. Always fun to hear a new. I mean, Egypt makes sense. It does make sense. It's so
weird that he's pretty close to the mainstream on some things, but then he's like, oh yeah, don't summon UFOs, because you never know what they are. They might be demons, and it's just not good. Like it's just a whole.
Big thanks, Peter, for coming on the show. Big thanks to you guys for listening. Big thanks to all you motherfuckers who support the show. GrandAmerica.ca/support. We couldn't do this show without you. It's a value for show, not a free show. Head over to GrandAmerica.ca/support today. Sign up for a monthly, make a one-time donation. Whatever you want to do. Whatever makes your conscience clear when you're listening to the show, and to compensate all the hard work we put into this thing.
I'm working on a book called Ancient Egypt, The Light of the World, actually. There's some interesting chapters and books. Well, it's a 12-book series, but some of the chapters get into some of the mysteries of the dead, the Book of the Dead and the mysteries of Mementa. And it gets into the astronomical mythology, sign language, and Hebrew Genesis and Egyptian wisdom. A lot of talk about Dendera in this book, and we're going to Dendera, so I want to kind of dig into it a little bit, see why this book is referencing Dendera so much.
You better be an Egypt expert by the time we go. I'll be quite disappointed.
This is super esoteric. It's very deep.
Adultbrain.ca. Check out all those audio books we've been working on over there. Contact@thecabin.com if you want to check out those events we were talking about earlier with Randall Carlson or Dave Matheson or Brandon Powell or all of the above. Do we have all of the above? I don't think we can get them all in one place just yet. It's coming. Other than that, we love you guys. Thanks for listening, and we will see you next week.
Teach me all your secrets to get a good handle on a better way to live. How does one get out of bed every day in the throes of the apocalypse? Should I bury my head in the sand or sabotage their evil plan? I feel really trapped, an ant burned by a magnifying glass. It's all a little bit too convenient, all the evidence went up in flames. Phone phonies, fraudsters, scammers belong in the slammer. My friend, best give up their names. Should I call on militiamen or pass out a petition pen? I feel really trapped, an ant burned by a magnifying glass. I don't know what y'all been told, but I got a soul made out of gold. Sound off, 1, 2, sound off, 3, 4, cadence count, 1, 2. A big ball! Some time ago a crazy dream came to me. I dreamt I was walking into World War III. As prophetic as humidity, as aching bones, as frantic animals. Sophia wrote it down, built an ark, now she floats it down a river dark. As prophetic as deja vu, as wormwood, as falling stars above. Sophia wrote it down, built an ark, now she floats it down a river dark. I can't even hear my own thoughts for the life of me over the din of a bruised and broken culture. The media spins and splatters and spins and clatters, and I cringe because it's psychological warfare. Don't you feel yourself getting really mad? How did we let it get this bad? Don't you feel really trapped, like a brain in a vat? Trying really hard to close Pandora's box, but sirens are singing me off a cliff. I'm looking to hitchhike to Shangri-La over yonder. Sophia, would you give me a lift? Hopped out of the Hegelian rebellion. Say goodbye to all you Machiavellians. Let evil destroy itself. I'm bound for Shangri-La. Shangri-La. I'll let you be in my dream if I could be in yours. I'll let you be in my dream if I could be in yours. As prophetic as morning doves, as groundhogs, as fallen stars above. Sophia wrote it down, built an ark, now we're floating it down a river dark. As prophetic as white wolves, as butterflies, as rainbows. Sophia sings it now. We built a plane, now we're taking flight above a river